Welcome to Negocios with BISILA BOKOKO, business with BISILA BOKOKO. You could say it in English, you could say it in Spanish, it doesn't matter. And today I'm very happy to speak about climate change. It's something that we all should definitely be conscious about it with Chris Round. And I would like to welcome you to Negocios with BISILA BOKOKO today.
Thank you for having me.
So Chris, tell us about your background and how did you end up being a climate change expert?
That's a good question. So I did an undergraduate degree in biology, and as an undergrad, I was thinking, what kind of issues can I work on? Where can I really make a big contribution? And I remember going to a lecture on climate change for one of my courses and realizing, hey, this is the biggest thing I could possibly work on. So that's how I began to get engaged. I went to graduate school, got a degree in climate policy as well as one in environmental science. And then I've been working in climate change consulting and climate politics for the last 6 years.
Well, and now you're an advisor for the DNC Council on Environment and Climate Crisis.
Yes.
What is the DNC first for some of our viewers, Spanish speaker viewers, and what is your role?
So my role is I advise the DNC Council on climate policy. The DNC itself is the Democratic National Convention. It's basically the main organizational part of the Democratic Party in the United States.
Beautiful. And how is your day-to-day in this role?
So I end up assisting the council on different policy recommendations, on different people in Congress or people around climate politics will come to the council and ask about, what can we do? What are potential changes? What are the general advice? So I do that as well as I've been doing climate consulting in the federal space for many years.
Beautiful. And can you let us know how is Biden administration approaching climate change and also the private sector?
Sure. So climate change has been one of the main priorities for the Biden administration. This has really been the case since when COVID came along. Really, it was really clear to everyone that the window of opportunity is the wrong word, but the need for addressing climate was just so much larger than what people's original ambitions were. So as a result, the Biden administration has really tried to put this front and center, beginning on January 27th with a major executive order. You see it in legislation currently going through Congress that's being debated, both the budget reconciliation package and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And then within the executive branch, it's been really a major focus.
And where are we seeing an increase in investments in renewable energy?
So this gets to how the Biden administration is approaching the private sector. So there's major investments that are necessary in battery infrastructure, and renewable energy sources in general, but particularly we're seeing a lot of resources being put towards improving battery technology. So kind of when you look at venture capital investment, when you look at kind of these larger private investment firms, they're looking at that. They're looking at that as well as potential, advances on current renewable energy technologies. So we're talking solar or wind. And in combination to that, you're seeing at the Department of Energy more resources going to programs like ARPA-E and potentially a group called ARPA-C. So ARPA-E is basically a laboratory and investment group within the Department of Energy that helps to fund promising technologies for renewable energy. And ARPA-C, which if it ends up being funded and put into place, would do that for carbon capture technology to help pull greenhouse gases out of the air.
And what you will say that are these issues around climate change that are not often discussed?
So there are two. One of the big ones I find is that when we talk about climate, we talk about the impacts of climate change. There are certain groups that tend to be left out of the conversation. For example, individuals with disabilities. Climate is going to have, not just when we talk about the impacts of climate change, but design climate solutions. So for example, one of the major areas that we can address is air conditioning and temperature management within buildings. One thing we have to remember when we talk about that is you have some people who, due to a disability, actually can't regulate their own body temperature. When we talk about disaster response, we have to talk about people who may have mobility issues or may have mental health issues, and that may interfere with the ability to respond to disasters. So when designing kind of comprehensive climate policy, we have to think about those elements.
And as a society, all of us, what can we do to bring more consciousness into companies?
So one thing companies need to recognize in general is that climate change is, it's an ESG risk. It's an environmental, social, and governance issue. And there are two parts of this. One is look at your supply chains. Look at, okay, where are the potential vulnerabilities here? Look at, and not just, hey, don't respond to that by saying, okay, can we sweep this under the rug? Because one is eventually all these ESG risks will come back and be an issue later on if they aren't an issue already. And two, if you get out ahead of them, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. And if you can get out and start identifying where climate risks and where there might be greenhouse gas emissions coming from your supply chains and resolving them early, it will be easier to deal with in the future. And you'll be doing a good thing.
Absolutely. And what advice you would give to the new generations as we approach climate change, because they are the ones who will suffer more the consequences of our actions?
Political mobilization is really important, putting pressure in your workplace to get your company, get your employers acting on climate change, putting pressure on your politicians. It's really, really important for people on the younger side to be very, very active on this issue, because as you said, they're going to be dealing with the worst impacts of it.
Why do you think that a lot of people in the United States, some people, they still not believe in climate change?
So I think it's two parts. One is you look at the activity of the fossil fuel industry. The fossil fuel industry, working with very good PR firms, has for many, many years tried to muddy the waters on climate change, whether that was trying to get people not to believe it exists, whether that's trying to delay action, because their business plan was built around continuing to emit carbon through fossil fuel use. And what's now starting to happen is, all right, we're starting to make major movement now, which if you've seen recent news in the IPCC report is, really important. And now fossil fuel companies are scrambling because they didn't engage with this ESG risk properly back 30 or 40 years ago when they knew about it. So there's a lesson on two parts here. One is, okay, we have to recognize the role that PR firms and fossil fuel industry played in this in American discourse on climate, as well as for other industries go, hey, if there's an ESG risk, get out ahead of it. That way it's not as big a threat to your overall business.
And to wrap up, I would just like to ask if you believe that the current administration is more willing also to work internationally and to join forces with particularly Europe that has been a partner for many years.
Yeah, so one of the first things the Biden administration did was rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement. And they've made climate, particularly going into the next round of talks in Glasgow, one of the centerpieces of their foreign policy.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Chris. I think it was great, the insights that you give us, and also to bring a little bit more consciousness among all of us to make this happen, because it's a joint effort. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.